Okay, well, hello and welcome to another episode of the New Testament Journey. My name's Andy, I'm here with Tom, and today we jump into the pretty epic letter of 1 Peter.
Yeah, and I love it because it's the letter from the boss, like, okay, the demi-boss, but, you know, this is, I just more and more, I feel like when Jesus basically puts his hand on Peter and is like, okay, you know, you're going to be the rock, you're going to be the one on which I build everything. Somehow, in my reading of the New Testament, it's always been Paul. Everything was Paul. And then I just kind of this fresh return to Peter. It's like, if anybody's going to be the one who tells us how to do it, it's going to be the one that Jesus put his hand on and said, "You're the man." So yeah.
So you're about to become a Catholic, or?
No, I mean, I just think there's just real benefit in letting Jesus steer how we then read the rest of the New Testament.
Yeah.
And I think something that I've probably done a lot is just let the books that I read make me think that Romans was the main book in the New Testament. And actually I think the main book in the New Testament is Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. And then Paul himself would say, it's all about Jesus, it's all about him. And Peter's like, okay, let me guys explain to you how this guy who appointed me wants us to do this stuff.
Yeah, amazing. And obviously he had the experience of being there, front row seat, the whole thing. It's such a rich letter, isn't it? I mean, I was, reading it and rereading it. It's almost kind of poetic. Like every sentence, every word, every turn of phrase has got. You can go off in all kinds of different directions with it. It's like compact in, super rich.
And do we know at what stage he wrote these letters or this letter?
I'm not sure. You get kind of such a wide kind of.
To me, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like there's a seasoned minister in this.
Yeah, for sure.
He's been around the block. He's seen it. He's been public rebuked probably at Antioch.
To his face.
He's spoken to Ananias and Sapphira and seen them fall dead in front of his face.
Yeah.
So he's seen leaders come and go. He's seen new Christians come in and make it and do well. He's seen new Christians come in and flag and fail. And this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, not his first time. That is for sure. It's very, very rich. And there are some key themes in the letter. I mean, the first one that I wanted to pull out, which he references again and again quite near the start of the letter, is this idea of the people of God as foreigners or exiles. Now, I was thinking a little bit about foreigners. I've had one experience of living abroad in a country not my own, where I didn't grow up. My experience was, when I first got there, I thought, this is the same as back home. They've got the same similar shops. The sun comes up, the night falls. People speak to each other, very, very similar. And then my experience was, the longer I lived in a foreign land, the more foreign it felt. And the more I was like, these people are different to me. The thinking is different. The mindset is different. The culture is different. Yeah. I am a stranger. I am weird. I am different. It's very disconcerting. But it was that experience of, I'm foreign. I'm different. Yeah. I'm not the same as what's going on here. I'm just... No amount of trying to fit in will make me the same as who these people are. And so this is an interesting kind of picture for me as a Christian. I thought, do you know what? There have been seasons in my life, you maybe think particularly about maybe a school environment or something like that. And it's like, I am different.
Yeah. And the standard understanding of exile or being a foreigner is a negative one, isn't it?
Yeah.
In our culture.
Yeah.
You feel like everybody else and then me.
Yeah.
And exile carries with it some sort of heritage from Old Testament language.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, because you put that in your devotional. That it's very rich, this idea of exile, isn't it?
I mean, exile is effectively national death.
Wow.
Because in the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, everything was about, you will get into this land. God will give you this land. He'll live with you in this land. He'll establish you in this land. And exile is, you've lost the land, and you've lost the presence of God, and you've lost the promises. And so it carries with it, not only are you this normal everyday thing, but also you're like, and this is in judgment. Judgment is upon us. And Peter flips this in a fascinating way, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not got that kind of devastation to it at all, does it?
So his thing, which is, I mean, just love this, because a key thing that you see in the New Testament is that the Old Testament story advances, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And you see the promises of the Old Testament being made, more and more and more promises. Yeah. And then Jesus comes, and in some way he absolutely and totally does what the Old Testament prophets and people who read the Old Testament expected him to do. Yeah. And in other ways, he totally does not do what they expect him to do. And so they talk about continuity and discontinuity. Mm-hmm. And what happens with Jesus is that he brings an end to the exile. But it's not what they thought it was going to be. It's not the kingdom being restored to Israel. It's not the Romans being kicked out of the land of Jerusalem. But it is the kingdom being restored to Israel, including the Gentiles. And the kingdom is God himself. And so what Peter's saying in this theme of exiles is, yes, you continue to live as people who don't fit in. Yeah. Different. But, I mean, for me, the first thing about exile is it's defined by joy. It's joy. Everything is joy. Like, we have inexpressible and glorious joy. Yeah. And so it's this bizarre thing where it's the now and the not yet of the kingdom. Yeah.
Because we are exiles from the kingdom that is coming.
So we are the land that we're foreign to is a land that's actually not happy, not doing well, and ultimately coming under the judgment of God. Yeah. And the land that we are living as part of in our hearts is the land that's abounding in just fullness of life. Mm-hmm. We know what it is to be human. We know what it is to know God. Yeah. We know what the future, and the future is ours. Yeah. And so it's just this glorious and inexpressible joy. And then he says joy later in the chapter, doesn't he? It's twice he comes back to the idea of joy. Verse 6, in all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Yeah. So you're foreigner in all kinds of trials, but you rejoice. And then you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. And so you're filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. Yeah. So are you? More and more I find I am. Mm-hmm. I mean, just more and more, just this surprising moments of like, oh, God, like he knows me, he loves me, he's working in my life, and that is your inheritance as a follower of Jesus. If you follow Jesus, and if you don't follow Jesus yet, and you're trying to work out like, do I want to follow him, or what does it mean to follow him? What it means is joy surprises you routinely throughout the day. At moments it shouldn't.
Yeah, there's something about the kind of simplicity of the gospel that never really loses its punch, does it? It just gets sweeter as you go, and those kind of foundational truths of, Jesus loved me and gave himself for me. Yeah. It just gets sweeter, doesn't it?
Yeah. And yet that is fundamentally lived in an environment where you face and suffer trials of all kinds.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about suffering then, because that definitely is another key theme of the book, isn't it?
And I've noticed, Andy, that this is something you really care that the church knows about.
I don't know. I mean, you kind of wrestle with it yourself, don't you? But I think I feel like we can fall into a naivety which doesn't serve us well, and it's this kind of and it doesn't match what we've seen in the New Testament journey. So, often we can think, okay, the Christian life, something along the lines of the Christian life is a life where joy surprises me routinely throughout the day. Yeah. And therefore I think, what would be a life that routinely surprises me with joy.
Yeah.
Or it's probably like, people sending me.
So we carry into that idea of joy what our culture tells us brings joy, which is circumstantial happiness.
Yes, exactly. And that's not what we will walk into. Totally. Yeah. And therefore you can sometimes see people fall into this really discouraged state, or that they feel like, even to the point, am I really a Christian? Because I'm suffering these kind of trials. And this seems to be a little bit about what Peter's writing into. The line, "Do not be surprised that these come upon you." And it is a common Christian thing. It's like, I'm absolutely shocked that life would be difficult. And I mean, we speak, we preach, we want to inspire people and push people on. And the easiest way to do that is to tell stories with happy endings. And therefore that, the kind of church culture of, your breakthrough's on its way, he will make a way, all of which contains great truth. But what I've seen in the New Testament journey is a real realism about, you're going to face some difficulties. You are facing difficulties. You will face difficulties. And the writers, they seem to want to prepare us for this in some way. Give us a little bit of resolve that we wouldn't just be crushed by.
So I guess if the end destination is joy, our society tells us the way you get to joy is that your life gets easier and easier, and your circumstances get happier and happier. And if you do that, you'll get to joy. And what that does actually is more and more people have this increasingly crushing sense upon them, like, I'm obviously not doing the right thing, because my circumstances aren't getting easier and easier, and my circumstances aren't getting happier and happier. And this thing that is salvation of joy experience is just it's more and more elusive, and then I'm disillusioned. I forget it. And what Peter's showing us is that is the correct destination. That desire you have in your heart is correct. But the way you get there is holiness, worked out through reverent fear, in the midst of trial.
Which is just never it's never how you would design it, is it? It's never how you would think. That's the path.
So, I mean, I guess, there's a couple of really practical bits towards the end of this book, aren't there? Where he talks about wives with husbands and living godly lives in a pagan society, like serving effectively an evil emperor, or at least an ambivalent emperor. And he talks about slaves even when you're mistreated and abused. Suffering for being a Christian. So, just what are the practical things then he tells us to do?
I think there is that thing about not being surprised. Like, this would be expected. There's an image which he comes back to, I think, a couple of times, of the idea. It's not one I particularly like, actually, but it is the truth. This idea of our faith being tested and proven by the trials that are coming upon us. One thing that's helped me with that image a little bit is he references fire. It is the idea of metal being purified. It's not so much tested like an exam at the end of the school year. Are you up to it or not? It's more this idea of you're being purified. The trial itself is helping you come to a place of purity.
So let's just come to that, because quite often I've heard people say to me, I'm not sure what the lessons I'm meant to be learning.
Right, okay.
If I could just learn it, then this suffering will end.
Yes.
Is that right?
I don't think it's intellectual always. I think it's at the heart level.
Okay.
So, for example, if we're talking about the scenario whereby I'm expecting happiness to come through improved circumstances, and maybe in my life, I think once I get to that next house, then the joy will really kick in, and I can really serve the Lord. And a fiery trial comes upon me. My accommodation circumstances get worse. Well, one of the purity things in that is cleansing my heart of idols.
Explain that a bit more. What do you mean by that?
Well, because I see that actually I had hope in I don't want to say it's always wrong to hope for something better, but maybe there was something in my heart whereby I actually thought, that's the answer.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's my desire.
Yeah.
And then it's taken away from me.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Pain. But with that, it's a little bit of purity.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what am I really living for?
Yeah.
What do I want? And that kind of impurity in my heart has been tested by fire. And hopefully that, that in the trial that falls away somewhat, and I'm left with, do you know what?
Yeah.
Whether I'm in a mansion or whether I'm homeless, back to the other week, Hebrews 11, living in a cave.
Yeah.
If he is with me, then that's my joy.
That's right. And it's a more glorious joy than you could ever have from having a American fridge. and underfloor heating. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to walk down in the morning and have tiles that walk on my feet.
You do keep coming back to that one.
my toes to be warmed as I'm making my coffee. But I know so many people who have that in their lives, in their words, feel barren.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But Jesus brings joy. Okay, so that's one thing. So we've got the idea of be ready for it.
Yeah.
We got the idea that see it as something that refines you, like, a bit like fire.
Yes.
Are there any others?
There is a strong theme, we might come to it more fully later, but there is a strong theme of there is a day coming when this is all going to be flipped.
Yeah.
And you are going to be either vindicated or judged based on your behaviour during this trial now.
Yeah.
It comes through quite strongly, I think, through the letter. Yeah,
I mean, doesn't he? I mean, I'm going to try and find that because I was actually, again, even though I've read this loads of times, was relatively surprised by actually what he says about judgment. So this is from chapter 1. He says, as obedient children, don't conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. Just as he who has called you is holy, so be holy in all you do, for it is written, be holy because I am holy. And since you call on a Father who judges each person's work impartially, live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you, but from the ancestors, but from the precious blood of Christ. And he carries on. And so the idea is you're going to be, we will face a judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. And... yeah.
So how does that encourage me when I'm suffering? Because again, I think a lot of people would think, oh, judgment is really a bad thing.
Yeah.
Do we ever find a single person in the New Testament who thinks the coming judgment is a bad thing?
Well, it's a slight double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, they do, many of them are longing for the day when it will come. And there is also a realism of, are you ready?
Yeah.
And this will not be good news for those on the wrong side of it.
Yeah.
I mean, how does it encourage us in our suffering? I think there is an element of suffering, and again, as we're talking about our scenarios, what it can lead to if people aren't getting the circumstantial happiness they think will bring them joy. It can lead to a kind of escapism or hedonism. Well, let's just throw off any restraint, eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die, what's the point, kind of thing. And I think there is something about, do you know what, you're part of a bigger story. You are going to be judged, and I think there's something in the human heart whereby we want to do well, we want to be great, and the kind of easiest metric for that is, well, what do other people think of me and what I'm doing? And so if circumstances are going against you and you think, it doesn't appear good to anybody around me. And part of the encouragement of judgment, I think, is, look, there is one watching, that even if you are having the worst hand ever, he sees, he'll judge, you will be vindicated. So I think there is a comfort in suffering of, do you know what? You're looking after this elderly parent with dementia. Nobody else is seeing it. No reward, no applause, no support.
And because you're doing that, you're not able to go and see your friends. You're not able to do anything that seems impressive. You've had to scale back on that promotion you were going to take. So you haven't got enough money to go on that nice holiday because it's gone on this instead.
All the costs of doing what before God you think is the right thing. and the encouragement of judgment is, well, that will be vindicated.
Yeah.
If you're in the right.
Yeah, there's one who sees. Yeah,
there's one who sees.
And his opinion is the one that matters in the end.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really great. Actually, I think that's really helpful. So we want to be ready. We want to see it as something that is like a bit like fire, you know. It's like and that comes back to Hebrews, doesn't it? He disciplines those he loves. He trains us. And then the idea that there was going to be a day that actually will sort you out. Yeah. Is there anything else, or is that sort of it on that?
They were my three big ones. I mean, it is interesting that he cites Noah in a positive way, and I think in some ways the Noah story sums up those things. And again, it's one of those stories that I kind of think, oh really, you know, building a massive ark for hundreds of years. I mean, it's ridiculed in our culture, isn't it? Yeah. But he cites it as a positive, like he's heard the word of the Lord. Yeah. He's in the midst of a people who think he's ridiculous, who are just living in any kind of hedonism, because why not? Yeah. And he lives his life in sober expectation of a coming judgment. Yeah. And ultimately he's vindicated in that.
So I guess in all these things it kind of helps us think, I won't be taken out of the game by suffering. What does Peter want us to do with our lives? So here's my time, you know, okay, you're telling me that I shouldn't be just pursuing circumstantial happiness, expecting that isn't the thing. You know, expect life to be hard, expect to live like an exile, but what should I be positively and actively be pursuing?
Yeah, and this is maybe the other suffering answer I missed, which is that there's a big theme in the letter of just the greatness of Christ, and let's follow in his footsteps, Christ as example, which is absolutely amazing. And I started kind of taking notes of the different ways that Peter describes Jesus or titles Jesus through the letter.
Yeah. Go on, let's hear those.
Yeah. Well, in a short letter, like 5 chapters, he talks about him as the Lamb without blemish or defect. He talks about Jesus coming again. He talks about Jesus as Messiah, Jesus as the living stone. There's at least a couple of times where he references Jesus as our great example, the one who we follow. He talks about him as the shepherd and overseer of our souls. And having talked about him as the one who was slandered and the one who suffered, he then has this amazing verse, 3:22, Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at God's right hand with angels, authorities and powers in submission to him, like top seat, you know? And Jesus as chief shepherd. So, you know, what is Peter encouraging the exiles to do? It's to walk the path that Jesus walked, following the chief shepherd.
And what's so fascinating about that is, yes, we have talked about suffering because we need to, and we must, but in no way does Jesus, he talks about he did suffer, but he wasn't defined by the suffering.
For sure.
He's defined by all these incredible things, which are really what God has done to him. Yeah. If that is the correct way to say it. The Father has at least done over him and through him. And that is, I think, just incredible. So how could we be like Jesus? What would it be like for us to follow in his example?
Well, let's take the living stone metaphor. This is chapter 2, verse 4. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. I mean, there's lots of things we could say about that, but this idea of we are being built together as a house for God, you could definitely give your life for that.
So what would I do to give my life to that? What would it be things I'd do?
So kind of thread through the book is the assumption, and again we've seen it at other points in the New Testament, that we will be in community, that we will be together with others, that we will be loving with others. That one of the primary ways that we will work out our faith is basically in how we relate to the community of faith.
Yeah, love covers over a multitude of sins.
That's a good one, yeah.
Isn't it?
And then, this is temple and priesthood language, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's the together we are people of his presence. And we could go lots of different ways with priests, but I do think there is this idea of we organise our lives in a kind of daily pursuit of that which will welcome the presence of the Lord.
Yeah, totally. And I'm just fascinated, again, just reading it through just before we did this, but there's a lot about what you do with the desires that come up from within you, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I think Augustine spoke about desire, like everything ultimately is good.
Yeah.
But what happens is that he called it privation. Evil is a privation of good. So an evil desire is a desire that was at root good, but it gets twisted inside of your gut somehow. So when you experience that desire, it's a desire of lust or greed or selfish ambition or whatever is pride. And so the instinct of the believer seems to be, according to Peter, is you just be really careful with these things that you just think this is so naturally what I want to do.
Yeah.
But to actually look, hold on, are these desires taking me into being a priest, into loving and serving this incredible God? Is this taking me towards the joy that comes through walking in his ways?
Yeah.
Or is this taking me away from that? And over and over again he'll talk about, you used to do this way, but now you do it that way.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. So discernment almost of what's happening inside of yourself is a really crucial act or calling upon all of us.
Yeah. And one word, kind of the last one that I wanted to pick up on, I think it comes up 3 times in different contexts in the letter, this word sober.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite an interesting, and I couldn't immediately think of other places in the New Testament where it's kind of knocked so frequently. But I thought, gosh, that's an interesting... he talked about it in terms of being aware that the devil's an enemy prowling around you, aware that judgment is coming. But just... And then hearing you speak about, be aware of your desires, where they're taking you. There is a soberness, a seriousness to life. We're being tested by fire. We're on our way to joy, but it's this kind of don't just kind of whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you get that a little bit in 1 Timothy, don't you, as well? Like sort of the they talk about the you don't have a spirit of what is it? Timidity.
Yeah.
But of power, love, and sound mind. But the word sound mind there is almost like sober-mindedness. Yeah. And I think if you're somebody who has struggled with alcohol, then the idea of soberness is like you're alert to the fact that round this corner there may well be a shop that sells alcohol that you are very attracted to, or pub or whatever it is, and you go to people's homes and they might offer you a drink, and it's just this constant awareness that there is this thing actually that could be my downfall.
Yes.
And I think a core thing for us to pursue as followers of Jesus is the humility to say, I could be my own worst enemy.
Yeah.
I just want to be humble enough to actually say, Lord, you know better than I know.
Yeah.
This thing that I think looks really attractive to me may not be what you're saying is right.
Yeah.
And that kind of meekness or that humility, God, like, you love me and you know what is right and good.
Yeah.
I think that's sober. To me, I think that's what the sober-minded thing brings in.